Every city has a memory, but some cities remember too much. Istanbul is one of them, and standing above its streets, its shores, its centuries, there is a tower that has watched everything without ever blinking, the Galata Tower. At first glance, it looks harmless. Stone, round, silent. Tourists climb it, cameras flash, sunsets are admired. But this tower was never built for beauty. It was built to watch, and watching is power. Before Istanbul was Istanbul, before it was Ottoman, before it was even fully Byzantine, this tower was already preparing for fear. Because fear is what builds watchtowers. Not hope, not art. Fear. Fear of invasion, fear of rebellion, fear of what might come from the sea. And from the top of Galata, you can see everything. The Golden Horn, the Bosphorus, the narrow streets below. Nothing moves without being noticed. This is why the story of the Galata Tower is not a story of architecture. It is a story of control. But let's slow down, because to understand this tower, we must first understand where it stands. Istanbul is not just a city, it is a collision, Europe and Asia, East and West, Christianity and Islam, empire and empire, and whenever worlds collide, someone builds something tall to watch the chaos unfold. The Galata Tower was born in the 14th century, at a time when Constantinople was weakening. The Byzantine Empire, once unstoppable, was bleeding from within. Trade routes were shifting, power was fragmenting, and into this uncertainty stepped the Genoese. Merchants, sailors, strategists. They did not come with armies, they came with money. And money builds walls faster than swords. In 1348, the Genoese raised the Galata Tower, not as a symbol of the city, but as a symbol against it. A statement that said, "We are watching you." From the top of this tower, they could track ships before they reached the harbor. They could detect danger before danger announced itself. They could see rebellion forming. This was not a lighthouse, it was an eye. And eyes make people behave differently. But history is never polite, because in 1453 the world changed. Constantinople fell, the Ottomans entered the city, church bells were replaced by calls to prayer, an empire died, another was born. And here is where the Galata Tower becomes truly fascinating, because the Ottomans did not destroy it, they did not erase it, they kept it. Why? Because power recognizes usefulness. A tower that can see everything is never obsolete. So the Galata Tower was reborn, not as a Genoese weapon, but as an Ottoman tool. It became a fire watchtower in a city made of wood, where one spark could erase thousands of lives. From Galata, guards scanned the horizon day and night. Smoke meant panic. Fire meant disaster. And when the tower signaled danger, the city listened. But protection has a dark twin: control. Over the centuries, the Galata Tower was used as a prison. Men entered through its doors and did not know when they would leave. High walls, cold stone, silence broken only by footsteps above. The tower that once watched ships now watched suffering. And then, there is the moment that transformed Galata from a symbol of fear into a legend. In the 17th century, a man climbed to the top of this tower. His name was Hezarfen Ahmed Çelebi. He did not come with chains. He came with wings. Not poetry, real wings. Inspired by science, by observation, by courage, Hezarfen stood where guards once stood. But instead of watching the city, he jumped. From the Galata Tower, he flew across the Bosphorus, from Europe to Asia, a human body in the sky. The Sultan watched. The city froze. Because the moment a human flies, the rules change. Some say Hezarfen was rewarded. Others say he was exiled, because innovation inspires wonder, but it also terrifies power. And the Galata Tower had just become a launch point for the impossible. But even legends do not protect stone. The tower burned, collapsed, was rebuilt. Earthquakes shook it, fires scarred it. Each era repaired it, reshaped it, used it. And now, today, it stands calm, polished, safe, Instagram-friendly. But stone remembers every scream, every watchful night, every empire that thought it would last forever. The Galata Tower is not a monument to one nation. It is a monument to time, and time always wins. So as this video begins, remember one thing. You are not looking at a tower. You are looking at a witness. And witnesses never forget. Stay with me. Because the Galata Tower has more to tell than history books ever dared to write. The Galata Tower was never meant to be friendly. It was not built to invite travelers, to celebrate culture, or to welcome strangers into the city. It was built to watch them, to understand why we must return to the 14th century, a time when the world was unstable and trust was a luxury no empire could afford. In the 1300s, Constantinople was no longer the invincible capital it once had been. The Byzantine Empire was weakening from within. Its armies were stretched thin. Its economy was fragile, and its enemies were many. But the greatest threat did not always come with swords. It came with ships. The sea was power. Trade routes meant wealth. Wealth meant influence, and influence attracted rivals. This is where the Genoese enter the story. The Genoese were not conquerors in the traditional sense. They were merchants, bankers, and master navigators. They understood something crucial. You don't need to rule a city to control it. You only need to control what comes in and what goes out. By the mid-14th century, the Genoese had established a powerful colony in Galata, just across the Golden Horn from Constantinople. Officially, they were allies of the Byzantines. In reality, they were competitors, and competitors do not sleep peacefully. The Genoese lived with constant anxiety, enemy fleets, political betrayal, local uprisings, a collapsing empire next door. So they did what fearful powers always do. They built upward. In 1348, the Galata Tower was raised, not as a monument, not as a landmark, but as a watchtower. Its height was deliberate, its position strategic. From the top, guards could see ships long before they reached the harbor. They could track movement across the water. They could detect danger before danger announced itself. This was surveillance in stone. The tower sent a message, not only to enemies but to the city itself. We are watching. And when people know they are being watched, they behave differently. The Galata Tower was not designed to be entered easily. Its thick walls, narrow openings, and elevated vantage point were all meant to protect those inside and expose those outside. This was architecture as psychology, fear turned into structure. But there is a deeper truth here. The Genoese did not trust the Byzantines. Alliances were fragile, loyalties shifted, empires collapsed overnight. The tower was insurance. If Constantinople fell, Galata would still see it coming. And in 1453, that fear became reality. The Ottomans breached the city walls. Constantinople fell. An empire that had lasted over 1,000 years was erased in weeks. And yet, the Galata Tower still stood. Here is where history becomes revealing. The Ottomans did not destroy the tower. They understood its purpose immediately. Because fear looks the same in every empire, the Ottomans inherited a city that burned easily, that could be destroyed by fire as much as by armies. They transformed the Galata Tower into a fire watchtower. Day and night, guards scanned the city. Smoke meant alarm. Alarm meant survival. The tower that once watched enemies now watched disaster. But watching always carries another function: control. From its height, authority could be enforced. And slowly, the Galata Tower gained another role: a prison. Those who threatened order were placed inside stone walls that had once protected merchants. The tower's purpose had come full circle. What began as fear of invasion became fear of dissent. This is the true origin of the Galata Tower. It was never built to welcome people into the city. It was built to keep danger out and obedience in. It was a silent observer, a constant reminder that power was watching. Long before tourists climbed its stairs, long before legends gave it wings, the Galata Tower stood for one idea: survival through vigilance. And that idea would shape everything the tower became afterward, because once a structure is built to watch, it never truly stops. For centuries, humans looked at the sky and understood one painful truth: it was not meant for us. Birds belonged there, clouds belonged there, but humans were meant to walk, not fly. And yet, history is moved forward by people who refuse to accept limits. In the 17th century, in the heart of Istanbul, one man decided to challenge the sky itself. His name was Hezarfen Ahmed Çelebi. The word Hezarfen means master of 1,000 sciences, and this was not exaggeration. Hezarfen was not a magician. He was not reckless. He was an observer. For years he studied birds, their wings, their balance, their movement through air. He watched how they leaned into the wind, how they adjusted their bodies, how flight was not force, but harmony. He experimented in silence, small tests, short glides, failures no one recorded, because failure was dangerous. The Ottoman Empire valued order. Innovation was admired, but only until it became threatening. And the idea of a man flying was not just impossible, it was unsettling. Then came the day that turned Hezarfen into a legend. He climbed the Galata Tower. From its top, the city stretched endlessly below him. The Bosphorus separated continents, Europe on one side, Asia on the other. Wind rushed upward, people gathered, some laughed, some prayed, some waited for tragedy. Hezarfen stood still. Strapped to his body were wings crafted from wood and fabric, built not with magic but with understanding. And then he jumped. For a moment, time stopped. A human body fell toward the city, and then didn't fall. He glided across the Bosphorus, across fear, across history. From the Galata Tower to the Asian shore, a man crossed continents through the air. The Ottoman Sultan, Murad IV, watched in disbelief. At first, Hezarfen was rewarded: gold, praise, a place in history. But admiration quickly turned into fear, because if one man could fly, what else could humans do? Power is comfortable with miracles, until they threaten control. Soon after, Hezarfen was exiled, not punished for failure, but for success, because flying changes how people think. And rulers understand that ideas are more dangerous than weapons. Whether every detail of the story is literal or partially legendary does not change its meaning, because Hezarfen represents something timeless. The moment a human stopped asking, "Is it allowed?" and started asking, "Is it possible?" The Galata Tower had watched empires rise and fall, but that day it watched something else, a boundary break. And ever since, whenever we look at the sky and imagine being there, we are standing where Hezarfen once stood, on the edge between fear and flight. Fire has always been Istanbul's greatest enemy, not armies, not invasions, fire. For centuries, Istanbul was a city built mostly from wood. Homes stood close together, narrow streets trapped heat and smoke. A single spark could become a catastrophe, and many times it did. From its height, the Galata Tower watched flames rise again and again. It saw neighborhoods disappear overnight. It heard bells ring in panic. It felt the heat carried by the wind. This is why the tower's role became critical. The Galata Tower was turned into a fire watch tower. Day and night, guards climbed its stairs. They scanned the horizon endlessly. Smoke meant alarm. Alarm meant survival. When a fire was spotted, signals were sent across the city. Drums, flags, shouts. Entire districts depended on what the tower saw. But even vigilance could not stop destruction. In 1794, one of the most devastating fires in Istanbul's history erupted. The flames spread rapidly. Wooden houses collapsed. The sky turned black. The Galata Tower itself caught fire. Its wooden interior burned, floors collapsed. For a moment, it seemed the tower's long watch had ended, but it didn't. The tower was rebuilt, stronger, more resilient, because Istanbul refused to let it fall. And this would not be the last time. In 1831, another massive fire swept through the city. Once again, Galata burned. Once again, it survived. Each fire stripped the tower down to its stone core, and each time, the city rebuilt around it. This cycle of destruction and renewal became the tower's identity. Earthquakes followed. Istanbul sits on restless ground. The earth shakes without warning. Walls cracked, stones shifted, minarets fell. The Galata Tower swayed, but it did not collapse. Its thick walls absorbed shock. Its foundation held. Where lighter structures vanished, the tower remained. But survival is not passive. The Galata Tower was constantly repaired, modified, reinforced. Ottoman architects replaced wooden elements with stone. They strengthened its crown. They adapted it to survive the city's violence. Fire, earthquake, time, none were enough. And yet, destruction left scars. The tower carries them. If you look closely, you can see layers of history in its stone. Different textures, different colors. Each repair tells a story of disaster narrowly escaped. And then there is the human cost. When fires raged through Istanbul, people lost everything: homes, livelihoods, families. The Galata Tower watched silently. It could warn, but it could not save everyone. This is the cruelty of survival, to endure while others vanish. Over time, the city around the tower changed. Wood gave way to stone. Modern materials replaced ancient ones. Fire became less frequent, but memory remained. The Galata Tower stood as a reminder of how fragile civilization truly is. Empires believed themselves eternal. Cities believed themselves unbreakable. Fire proved them wrong. And yet, here stands the tower, not because it was invincible, but because it was rebuilt again and again and again. The story of the Galata Tower is not a story of perfection. It is a story of persistence, of a structure that burned, cracked, and broke, but refused to disappear, because survival is not about avoiding destruction. It is about what remains after it. And as long as the Galata Tower stands, it carries the memory of every flame that tried and failed to erase it.